So, Six Nations Full Contact Review, the latest Netflix documentary, fly on the wall docuseries about a specific sport, and it is rugby's turn to try and emulate the success of Drive to Survive. Welcome back to the channel. If you have watched it, then let me know, what did you make of it? Also, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of stuff. If I had a top headline to summarize my thoughts, was overall, I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I expected to, but I also had to get my head around the fact that it wasn't so much about the sporting side of things. It wasn't so much about the narrative of the championship. It was about the individual stories behind it, which in itself I think tells a story of who this is pitched at. Because, as I say, it is trying to do what Drive to Survive did to Formula One, which was incredible. It had like a literal commercial impact on the sport, increased the amount of eyeballs and people watching. And rugby is hoping for that, as a lot of sports have previously done as well. What I would say, and this is just me hypothetically speaking, I don't know if there's evidence to back this up. I wonder whether Drive to Survive was the exception rather than the rule. I don't know whether every single sports documentary is able to have the impact on a sport that did for Formula One. I could be completely wrong, but you see now tennis, golf, now rugby, there's been loads of football documentaries as well. Lots of other sports have tried to do it. I'm not sure anyone has been able to replicate what Drive to Survive did for Formula One, but I hope in some capacity this does do that for the sport of rugby. Because more than anything, whether you liked it or whether you didn't, I really hope that this works in terms of it getting enough viewers for Netflix to commission a second series. We already saw it with the Premiership one on Amazon Prime, which wasn't great. It doesn't shock me that there weren't enough viewers for Amazon to go for a second series. This, though, the Six Nations, I'd imagine the most watched, or certainly one of the most watched championships annually. It's international rugby, it gets more viewers anyway. I would hope that this is able to capture an audience better and that it does get retained. I feel like it is an important thing for the sport to get this right. I really don't want rugby to miss this opportunity. So let's get into the thoughts on it. As I said in my kind of top line, I love the individual stories. I really enjoyed Andrew Porter and Gail Fiku in particular. Seb Negri was good, even though I knew a fair bit about Ellis Genge's backstory. I enjoyed seeing that part as well. I thought the individual stories are really strong, humanising the players, telling their stories as individuals. Rugby is obsessed with it being a team sport, and I think being able to promote the individual within that is somewhere the game needs to get to. This will help. So I really enjoyed those elements of it. As you would expect with a documentary like this, the editing was excellent. It was really slickly and sleek in terms of how it was put together. But as I say, it's not without issues. Access, I think, is a big one. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious that England barely gave them anything. In that first episode, you had all this access in the Scotland camp, in team meetings, at training. England was surface level, I think, compared to that. And they weren't the only team that clearly weren't as receptive, and there were other reasons for that as well. I know the players weren't happy that it got thrust on them just before the championship. They didn't know what it entailed or quite what it was. They obviously weren't involved in those kind of negotiations and discussions. But even so, I think if this does get commissioned for a second series, you just need everyone to give better access. That is what makes these documentaries so good, and I don't think it's going to give anything up. I don't know if what their fear is. Is it that they'll give away tactics or game plans? I'm just not convinced that's going to be the case for a Six Nations a year ago, that you're going to give away something in that is going to hamper you a year later when it comes out. And I think it would be such a shame if rugby does miss this opportunity because teams didn't give us great access. And Formula One got away with it. Mercedes and Ferrari, two of the big teams, didn't take part in the first season. Then they took part after that, seeing the success. I would hope that some of those teams will watch the series, realise the access that other nations gave and how much better and engaging that was, and realise that they need to buck their ideas up. We can hope, and the first part of that is hoping that it does get commissioned for a second series, but it would be gutting if it didn't, and you look back at that and just think, just give them access. I speak about the lack of sporting action as well. I appreciate that this is made for a wider audience. Drive to Survive was massive for a younger audience and for the American audience as well. And I think the Six Nations and all the governing bodies are hoping for something similar here. Having said that, I just wonder whether there could have been a bit more of what was going on the pitch. It felt like this was more about telling the individual stories and you had a Six Nations going on in the background rather than emphasising the importance of the championship. And it's a fine balance, and actually the production company that make this are massively experienced in these sorts of documentaries. I know that they know what they are doing, but I just felt like they could have made slightly more of it, of where teams are in the table, of how many games they'd played and the games they'd won, and the significance of those games as well. Again, it was mentioned, but England-Scotland, huge rivalry, oldest test match there has ever been. I wondered whether they could have made more of that. Maybe people would disagree, but that was my gut instinct when I was watching it. I suppose a few other things are, I know I've seen it mentioned previously, of re-recording commentary to fit in with the story they're trying to tell in the documentary, which I know grates on a lot of people. I would probably agree with that, because at times it makes it feel like it's a bit of a contrived narrative. Now, casual fans or people that don't know anything about it won't even know that. But for example, after that episode 1, and England had lost to Scotland at Twickenham, and there was a line I think they'd re-recorded of, I'm paraphrasing, along the lines of, will Marcus Smith keep hold of the fly half jersey for England? Which I don't think was a huge narrative on the back of that game. I could be wrong, and there were other points in the docuseries as well that it felt like the narrative was a little bit contrived rather than being true to what actually happened. So yeah, let me know. I did actually really enjoy it. I've probably focused a bit more on the negatives now. I think it was really well put together. I was engaged in it the whole time. I enjoyed the stories and the background of these guys. But I have seen it got quite a negative reaction from a lot of people on rugby social media, which again maybe tells the story. This is for a wider audience. I know hardcore Formula One fans often complain about Drive to Survive, and hardcore tennis fans didn't find much in its Breakpoint, I think, isn't it? Their Netflix documentary. There was a lot that they thought was quite surface level. And maybe it is surface level, but maybe as well deliberately so, because it's not about the minutiae of a ruck and a maul and all the different elements and quite niche areas of the game. It is about broadening it, opening the doors, getting people to come in, engaging them with the personalities, plus also seeing the physicality. And actually, I suppose that's something I haven't mentioned that is a big, big plus. I think the way it embraced how brutal and bruising rugby is. There is a narrative and a concern, I think, at unions and governing bodies about how rugby appears to a wider audience of obviously all the concussion stuff, which is so important. But in doing so, they can take away from what actually draws so many people to the game, which is how tough it is, how physical it is, just the bruising impact that these guys go through. I actually thought it really embraced that, which is a big, big plus in my opinion. So let me know what you think. Six Nations Full Contact, your overall thoughts. I would have liked to see a bit more on the sporting side of things, but actually I really enjoyed still the individual stories. I still enjoyed it as a series overall. Let me know, do you agree? And it's so important it gets recommissioned. I really, really believe that. I think it's so important that we get a few more series, because I think, particularly after this first one, I think we will get better access. But let's wait and see. Comment down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.